I'm standing just outside the entrance to Cadillac's Emission Control Building. It's in this facility that Cadillac conducts tests to make certain its cars meet the present requirements for emissions control. The automotive emissions presently controlled by federal or state standards are carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, and oxides of nitrogen.
And great progress has been made in reducing their influence on air pollution. But of course, everybody knows that.
Or do they? Pardon me, sir. Could you tell me what you're doing here today?
We're burying the automobile. We're cleaning up the air. Pollution stinks! Smoke chokes!
The auto ought to go!
Go where, man?
We want a world of clean, fresh air, man, like it used to be before the fumes of the exhaust, the gas of the gasoline, the automobile.
Like it used to be?
They say that in the high and palmy days of Rome, a little ere the mightiest Caesar fell, the homes stood empty, and the people ran, coughing and sneezing in the Roman streets, and cursing and complaining, and crying out to mighty Caesar.
Caesar!
Citizen!
Caesar, the city is too full of smoke.
Oh, it's you again, Proboscis.
The smoke soils our togas. It stuffs our nostrils with particulates. Hear me, Caesar.
Caesar hears. Too much smoke from Roman fires.
And too much dust from Roman chariots. Our city smothers from chariot dust, and the chariots multiply and choke the streets and clog the Appian freeway at 5 o'clock. Hear me, Caesar.
Caesar hears. Farewell, Proboscis. Don't let that squirrel in here again, or his cousin Brutus either.
That's how it went in imperial Rome. 20 centuries later, the protesters still march on, and they're still picking on the chariot, which now has an engine and an exhaust pipe.
You want to know how I see the pollution picture? Here's how I see it. I see it like one big exhaust pipe spewing out carbons and nitrogens and oxides and particulates all over the country, suffocating the people, choking plant life.
Oh, that's so true, so really, really true. To rid ourselves of the pollution problem, something has to be done about the cars. If all the cars were removed from the face of the earth, 90% of the pollution would remain, most of it furnished by Mother Nature herself, who produces great quantities of hydrocarbons and carbon monoxide in forests and mountains and swamps, 10 times as much carbon monoxide as automobiles produce.
Oh, knock it off. What a sanctimonious, self-serving, dumb, specious argument.
Hey, stifle that. This girl here is no dumb species.
But all I'm trying to do is point out that it's the pollution in the cities, in heavy concentrations, that people are concerned about. That's where it causes the damage and the danger, not out in the open country.
That's true. The big problem is in the cities.
And the cars are in the cities. Long lines of traffic, exhaust emissions, gasoline fumes, smog. So, pollution is the problem's in the city, the cars are in the city, therefore, the cars are the problem.
Therefore, cars are the problem? The atmosphere in Philadelphia has caused sore eyes in many people, including my husband and myself.
Those are the words of Martha Washington, written in a letter in 1794, before the car, before the internal combustion engine, before the exhaust pipe. Cars were not the problem, therefore. The pollution that Mrs. Washington complained of came from coal-burning Franklin stoves. Whenever coal or oil is burned, any fuel containing large amounts of sulfur oxide is formed, a pungent, irritating, and potentially hazardous invisible gas. When combined with particulates, which are simply tiny particles of unburned residue, we get smoke. And in some cases, where industrial furnaces use great quantities of fossil fuels, and when weather conditions are conducive, we get smog. In highly concentrated form, sulfur oxide smog can be hazardous to health or even to life itself. This was the so-called killer smog of London, England, and Donora, Pennsylvania. Sulfur oxides, together with their particulates, are responsible for almost 30% of our pollution today. Practically none of it coming from automotive exhaust pipes. Automobiles have been a factor in the so-called Los Angeles-type smog, where sometimes a concentration of emission products, especially oxides of nitrogen and hydrocarbons, interact with sunlight to produce a photochemical smog. Not only is this type of smog pretty much limited to the Los Angeles Valley, it is not at all like the sulfur dioxide London smog, causing nowhere near the same danger to human health. Irritating, yes. Deadly, no. But to many people, maybe most of them, smog is smog, and they know who to blame for it, or at least they think they do.
Pollution is pollution, politics is politics, and cars is cars. It's as simple as that.
If we can send men to the moon, don't tell me the automobile companies can't design a pollution-free automobile.
While the automakers sit on their big fat profits, we'll be dropping in the streets waiting for them to do something. Why don't they do something?
Do something? PCV, AIR, CCS, TCS, ECS, SCS, and EGR. You must be NUTS.
One of the things that Cadillac does constantly in its emission control building is test exhaust emissions for compliance with governmental standards. Before the test procedure itself, the car must be soaked for at least 12 hours in a controlled temperature of 68 to 86 degrees. This 12-hour soak must take place immediately before testing, and it is done on the second floor of the emission control building. Stabilizing the engine at this temperature provides a condition very conducive to the production of hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, and oxides of nitrogen. And this means that the car's emission control systems will be tested under the most difficult conditions possible. Another requirement, also serving to make the standards both practical and difficult, is that the test must begin with a cold start, so the car is moved by elevator and jitney to the test stand. The test itself is a 23-minute, 18-cycle test, in which the test driver must follow a pre-programmed speed curve, a series of accelerations and decelerations designed to simulate a typical urban driving schedule. The driver must hold to the curve very closely, for if he deviates beyond a tolerance of plus or minus 2 miles per hour, or plus or minus 1 second from the time program, the car must go back to the soak room to get ready all over again for a new test. The exhaust is first channeled into a constant volume sampler, which measures the total volume of emissions being discharged by the exhaust system. Then a test sample of the exhaust gas is directed to a proportional sampler, where pollution emissions can be analyzed on a concentrated basis to determine, for example, how many parts of carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, and oxides of nitrogen the car is releasing per million parts of total exhaust emission. These are the sample bags that collect exhaust samples to be analyzed. The results are fed into a computer on the second floor. which immediately prints out a grams per mile analysis. This is the climax of the procedure. Carbon monoxide emissions must not exceed 39 grams per mile to meet federal and state of California requirements. When we think about grams, let's remember that it takes 455 of them to make a pound, which means that a Cadillac would, on the average, be driven about 12 miles before it released a pound of carbon monoxide. Since the days of 1962, when there were no emission control devices, the output of carbon monoxide by automobiles has been reduced by about 70%. Hydrocarbon emissions have been reduced by about 80% since the introduction of the PCV valve, the first of your emission control devices. And it would take about 140 miles of driving to release a pound of hydrocarbon emissions. For all Cadillacs meet California's requirement of 3.2 grams per mile, which is slightly more restrictive than the federal 3.4 grams per mile. Hydrocarbon and carbon monoxide emissions are caused by incompletely burned fuel, and servicemen are aware of the control systems developed to enable the engine to burn the fuel more completely by routing unburned carbons back through the combustion process, by the afterburner method used by AIR, by changes in fuel metering, air intake temperature, and in ignition timing to provide leaner fuel mixtures and a slower, more complete combustion. And you are aware, too, of the evaporative control system, which reduces the evaporation of raw hydrocarbon vapors from the fuel tank and the carburetor. Oxides of nitrogen are a special problem, partly because they are formed not from gasoline, but from the air itself, and partly because they thrive on the very same conditions that make our engines operate most efficiently: high pressure and high temperature in the combustion chamber. Whenever a fire starts, any kind of fire, so do oxides of nitrogen. The hotter the fire, the more they multiply. So the problem, simply stated, is finding a way to reduce oxides of nitrogen without at the same time reducing engine efficiency. They have been reduced somewhat by changes in spark timing and lowered compression ratios. And in 1973 Cadillacs, the EGR system you heard about in the September Roundtable will reduce them a good deal more, cooling the combustion chamber by routing exhaust gases back into the combustion process. But special problems or not, governmental standards, as now written in the Clean Air Amendments of 1970, require very nearly the complete elimination of these auto exhaust emissions for 1975-76 models. It's those amendments also which provide for a $10,000 maximum fine if we tamper with any of the owner's emission control systems to make it inoperative or not to operate as designed. These standards would allow only 3.4 grams per mile of carbon monoxide, 0.41 grams per mile of hydrocarbons, and 0.40 grams per mile of oxides of nitrogen. To put this another way, a 96% elimination of carbon monoxides, a 97% elimination of hydrocarbons, and a 92% elimination of oxides of nitrogen. These standards would allow a car to release fewer hydrocarbons per day than the shrubbery growing on a medium-sized residential lot. Less carbon monoxide than you'd produce by burning 4 logs in the fireplace over a 24-hour period. About the same amount of oxides of nitrogen that your furnace will emit in 5 hours of operation. These are the goals to be met. So, much has been done already to take the automobile out of the pollution picture. It is no longer a serious factor, even now. But what remains to be done will be much harder to do. For it means virtually eliminating the hydrocarbon and carbon monoxide emissions that are natural results of using gasoline and petroleum products as fuel, with only a little more percentage allowance for oxides of nitrogen, which thrive on the very environment of the efficient combustion process. This makes the problem a fundamental problem, and that will take an inventive technology to overcome. So it will be very hard to do, and nobody knows how it will be done. When the way to do it is found, this may be the place of discovery, and it will certainly be the place where the new process or method or equipment will be tested on Cadillacs of the middle 70s. But most of the important work in emission control will be going on in your service departments, done by servicemen who must inspect all the emission control systems regularly, but who must, beyond that obvious responsibility, apply diligent and patient craftsmanship to all the affected systems of the car. Taking careful pains, for example, that spark plugs are gapped well within tolerances, are torqued properly, that ignition timing is always set carefully and accurately, that the advance mechanisms do function as they're supposed to, that choke linkage moves with absolute freedom to ensure proper choke response, and so on. For we are in an era when the patience, diligence, and accuracy of our workmanship must not only gratify the expectations and pride of our customers, as you always have, but also satisfy the regulations, requirements, prescriptions, and limits set forth in public laws and watched over by both public and private advocates. Designing and making emission control systems to keep our car both great in performance and within governmental limits is Cadillac's part of the job. And we worry about it. Keeping them that way is yours. And Cadillac hopes you worry about that.
This is a petition asking the city council to outlaw all cars from the downtown area for 60 days to see how much it would help keep our air clean and our city free of traffic. How'd you like to sign it? Just to see what would happen, just to try something different.
How'd you like to try a bruised Adam's apple? That'd be something different.